I remember the sound before the pain, the sound of her laughter. That's how it began. That single cruel laugh that would haunt me for months to come. It was a quiet afternoon, the kind where sunlight feels too soft and safe, where you think nothing can hurt you inside your own home. I had just brewed tea for my son, Amir, and his wife, Nadia. My knee had been weak for years, but that day it gave way completely. The tray slipped, the cup shattered, and I hit the cold marble floor with a cry I couldn't swallow. But before I could even think of the pain, I heard her voice, a small, satisfied chuckle. She didn't rush to help. She didn't even move. She just stood there, arms folded, her lips curled in that quiet, poisonous smile. "Guess old age finally caught up with you," she said softly, like she was enjoying a private joke. For a few seconds I lay there frozen, not from the fall, but from disbelief. You see, I had treated that girl like my own daughter. I welcomed her into this home, cooked her favorite dishes, even handed her my own jewelry when she first married Amir. And in return, she gave me that smirk, that victory. But victory over what? I pushed myself up slowly, every bone trembling, and that's when I saw it. Something small had fallen near my foot. An envelope, cream-colored, worn at the edges. I reached for it, my heart pounding because I knew that handwriting. It was my late husband's. His name, his slanted letters. I could never mistake it. I froze. The room suddenly felt smaller, like all the air had been sucked out. Why would she have anything with his handwriting on it? He'd passed away almost 5 years ago, long before she entered our lives. When I looked up, she had already noticed. Her eyes darted toward the envelope, then back to me, and for the first time I saw something behind her calm smile, a flicker of fear. "What's this?" I asked, my voice shaking more than my hands. She shrugged, her tone smooth and unbothered. "Oh, just some old papers Amir found in your attic. I was going to give them to you later." But I knew she was lying. I didn't know how. I didn't know why. But the way she looked at that envelope, the way she reached for it too quickly, it was the look of someone guarding a secret. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. My husband had been meticulous about his papers. Every letter, every document. He'd left them organized for me before he died. I'd gone through them all. So where had this one come from? As I replayed her laughter in my mind, something dark began to form inside me. It wasn't just anger, it was suspicion, a feeling I'd never allowed myself to have toward family. I wanted to believe she'd simply been careless, that it meant nothing. But deep down I knew that envelope meant everything. When I went back to my room, the world suddenly felt colder. I kept hearing her voice. "Old age finally caught up with you." The more I thought about it, the more I realized. It wasn't a joke. It was a warning. She wanted me to feel weak, irrelevant, small. But what she didn't know was that I'd spent a lifetime surviving worse. I waited until everyone was asleep. The house was silent except for the occasional creak of the old wooden floors. My hands shook as I turned on the lamp and pulled the envelope from under my pillow, where I had hidden it. My name wasn't on it. That alone made my pulse quicken. In my husband's handwriting, it simply said, "For AN. Those initials burned into my mind. They weren't mine, and they weren't my son's. My hands trembled as I ran my fingers over the seal, still unbroken. What if it was something private from his business days? Or worse, what if it was something he never meant for me to see? I hesitated, my mind spinning. Maybe I was reading too much into it. Maybe Nadia had truly found it by accident. But if that were true, why hide it in her pocket? Why snatch it so quickly? I sat there for hours, staring at it. I thought about all the years I had spent building this family, about the love I had poured into it. About how, ever since Nadia married my son, things had started shifting. Little things at first, missing jewelry, whispered phone calls, locked drawers. I'd told myself I was imagining it. But now, holding this letter, I knew I wasn't. And yet, even as the questions piled up, one truth cut deeper than all the others. She had laughed when I fell. That was the moment something inside me changed. I wasn't just a mother or a widow anymore. I was someone who had just witnessed a mask slip. What would you do if the person smiling across the dinner table from you carried your late husband's secret in her pocket? Would you confront her? Or would you wait and watch? I wanted to believe in my son's choice. I wanted to believe she was still family. But as I stared at those two letters, AN, I realized I didn't even know who she truly was. The next morning, Nadia acted as if nothing had happened. She greeted me cheerfully, humming as she made breakfast. Amir kissed her forehead and asked if I was feeling better. I forced a smile and said yes, pretending not to notice how her eyes lingered on the table where I'd fallen yesterday. It was the same spot where she had stood and laughed. I spent the day moving slowly, quietly, observing. She was careful with her phone, locking it every time she put it down. When I asked her a casual question about her family, she gave vague answers, and when Amir mentioned visiting the bank later that week, her hand froze mid-air. Then she quickly changed the subject. By the time night fell, I had made up my mind. I would open the envelope. Whatever truth it held, I needed to see it, because something told me that inside that single piece of paper was the reason behind her laughter, the reason behind the sudden distance between my son and me. I waited until the house went quiet again. My fingers brushed the paper once more, feeling the rough edges against my skin. My heart was pounding so loudly I was afraid it would wake them. Then slowly, I broke the seal. The paper inside was yellowed with age. The ink faded slightly. But the moment I saw the first line, my breath caught. It wasn't addressed to me, and it wasn't to my husband's business partner either. It was to her. Nadia. My late husband had written something to my daughter-in-law long before she had even married my son. I sat there frozen, staring at her name in his handwriting, as the air around me grew thick with questions I wasn't ready to face. I didn't know then that this single letter would unravel everything I believed about love, loyalty, and family. But I was about to find out. I used to believe that love was enough to hold a family together. I was wrong. After my husband passed, the house felt too quiet, too heavy. Every ticking clock reminded me that it was just me now. Me and my son, Amir. I worked 2 jobs to keep him in school, skipped meals so he could eat, and sold my jewelry when he got accepted into university. I told myself it was worth it, because one day he'd look back and see everything I sacrificed for him. And when he brought Nadia home for the first time, smiling, his hand wrapped around hers, I thought that day had come. She was polite, soft-spoken, and her eyes shimmered with what I mistook for kindness. I thought, finally, God has sent me a daughter. But I should have known better. The change began small, almost invisible. Nadia started with things like the curtains, said they were too old-fashioned. Then came the dinner menu. She told Amir my cooking was too oily, too outdated, and soon they stopped eating with me altogether. Still, I brushed it off. She was young. I wanted her to feel at home. But slowly, the warmth in my house began to fade, replaced by something cold and quiet, like being a guest in a place I'd built with my own hands. One morning, I overheard them whispering in the kitchen. Amir's voice was low, cautious. Hers, sharper, cutting through the air like glass. "Your mother needs to learn boundaries," she said. Boundaries. That word burned. The same walls that once echoed with laughter, now echoed with that word. Boundaries. I wanted to ask, what boundaries can exist between a mother and her child? But instead I pretended not to hear. And yet pretending didn't make the humiliation stop. It only taught her I wouldn't fight back. The first real betrayal came disguised as a vacation. Amir called it a family trip. I was so excited. Finally, a chance to spend time together again. I asked where we were going, and Nadia smiled and said, "Oh, we'll tell you soon." Days passed. Then one morning, I woke to the sound of suitcases rolling down the hallway. I thought maybe they were packing early. When I stepped out, the door was open, the car engine already running. They didn't even tell me goodbye. Later, I saw their photos online. The family trip was to the Northern Hills, just the 2 of them. I tried to convince myself it was fine. Newlyweds need time alone. But when Amir returned, something in his eyes had changed. He no longer looked at me the way a son looks at his mother. It was distance, controlled, polite distance. The kind you have with a stranger you owe respect to, not love. That night, I cried quietly in my room. Not because of the trip, but because I finally realized what was happening. Nadia wasn't trying to be part of the family. She was trying to erase me from it. Still, I tried to forgive her. I told myself she was young, that she would grow, that Amir would see through it one day. But forgiveness has its limits. Mine ended the day I found the credit card. It happened by accident. Amir had asked me to find an old envelope in his drawer. While searching, I came across a bank statement, one that made my heart drop. There was a new card in Amir's name. Charges for clothes, jewelry, and expensive dinners. But the payments were being deducted from my account, my pension money, the money I lived on. I sat there staring at it, trying to understand. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe Amir didn't know. But when I showed it to him that night, his reaction broke me. He didn't look surprised. He didn't even look sorry. He sighed, rubbed his forehead, and said, "Mom, Nadia needed a few things. I'll fix it later, fix it." That was all he said. No apology, no explanation, just a quiet defense for her, as if my pain was an inconvenience. I remember standing there trembling, my voice cracking when I said, "She used my money without asking." And he answered, "It's our family money, isn't it?" That was when I realized he was no longer mine. But what happened next left me speechless. One afternoon, while cleaning the guest room, I found a small folded slip of paper under the dresser. At first, I thought it was trash, but when I picked it up and read the print, my blood ran cold. It was a receipt for a safe deposit box, registered under Nadia's name, but what sent a chill down my spine were the initials written in the corner. HK, my late husband's initials. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My husband had never mentioned a deposit box, not once. He'd been transparent about everything, every document, every account. So how could Nadia possibly have something connected to him? I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands shaking, my mind spinning. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe the initials stood for something else. But deep down I knew better. My husband was gone, yet somehow his shadow lingered, through her. When Amir came home that night, I showed him the receipt. My voice was calm, but inside I was screaming. I said, "Amir, do you know about this?" He took it from me, his expression unreadable. His eyes flicked across the page, then back to me, and in that silence I saw guilt. Not shock, guilt. "Where did you find this?" he asked quietly. "In the guest room, under the dresser." He exhaled slowly, rubbed the bridge of his nose, then finally met my eyes. "Mom, please stop digging." Those words cut deeper than any knife. Please stop digging. It wasn't a plea, it was a warning, a wall, the final confirmation that something dark was hiding in the spaces between us. I wanted to scream, "Why?" I wanted to shake him and say, "I'm your mother. How can you talk to me like this?" But I couldn't. Because in that moment, I realized something terrifying. Whatever secret Nadia was keeping, Amir knew about it. That night, I lay awake replaying every moment, every look, every laugh between them. The way she'd smiled when my knee gave out, the way he'd defended her, no matter what she did. It all connected now. She wasn't just trying to control him, she already had. And Amir, my sweet, loyal son, had become a stranger. What would you do if your own child told you to stop searching for the truth? Would you obey, or would you risk everything to uncover what they're hiding? I didn't have the answer then. But I knew one thing for sure. The woman my son chose had already started a war. And I was the only one who didn't realize we were fighting it. I looked at the receipt one last time before slipping it into my drawer, right next to the envelope with my husband's handwriting. The two pieces of paper felt connected somehow, like parts of a puzzle that would soon make sense. But what I didn't know then was that those papers were more than proof. They were warnings. Silent, deadly warnings of what was about to come. And when I finally decided to open the next door to the truth, I learned that some secrets don't destroy families overnight. They do it one lie at a time. When people talk about curiosity killing the cat, they never mention what happens when curiosity saves the truth. For weeks after finding that receipt, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my husband's name written beside Nadia's on that paper. I kept asking myself, what could she possibly have of his? The thought grew inside me like a weed, wrapping around every quiet moment. By the second week, I stopped pretending it was nothing. I had to know. I had to see that box with my own eyes. So one morning, I dressed as if it were any ordinary errand. I wore my plain shawl, the one I used to wear when paying bills after my husband died. I went to the same bank where we had once kept our savings. My hands trembled when I gave the clerk my ID and said I needed to update my record. He smiled politely, clicked through his computer, and then said something that made my heart stutter. "Oh yes, Mrs. Amir. I see your daughter-in-law has been managing the family account quite actively. She's been here 5 times since August. 5 times. My ears rang. I asked him to repeat it, just to be sure I hadn't misheard, but he said it casually again, as if that detail meant nothing. I thanked him, pretending to be calm, but my palms were slick with sweat. I left the bank with a fake smile and a storm inside me. Why was Nadia visiting so often? What was she accessing? That night, I sat alone in the dark living room, the clock ticking like a metronome for my thoughts. Every sound in the house, the creak of wood, the hum of the refrigerator, felt like a whisper warning me to stop. But I couldn't stop. What would you do if your instincts told you your own family was hiding something from you? The next morning, I made up my mind. If she could have secrets, so could I. I followed her. I waited until she left the house around noon, dressed immaculately as always, her perfume trailing through the air like arrogance. I stayed 2 cars behind as she drove toward the city. My heart pounded with every turn she took, terrified she'd spot me. She parked outside that same bank, and then she wasn't alone. A man was waiting near the entrance, leaning against his car. The moment I saw his face, the air left my body. It was Khalid, my late husband's old business partner, the same man who had vanished after my husband's death. The one who owed him money, who never even came to his funeral. And now he was shaking hands with my daughter-in-law like they were old friends. My fingers clutched the steering wheel so tightly my nails dug into my skin. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I saw the exchange. A small brown envelope passed from his hand to hers. She tucked it into her purse and smiled like she'd just won something. That night, I couldn't eat. I couldn't even look at Amir. He was laughing in the living room, watching TV with her, his hand resting on her knee as if everything in the world was perfect. I excused myself and went to his study instead. I hadn't entered that room in months. It used to smell like his childhood. Books, pencil shavings, the faint trace of my husband's cologne. But now it smelled sterile, like it didn't belong to either of us anymore. I searched quietly, afraid of the sound of my own heartbeat. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for until I found it. Beneath a pile of old tax papers, hidden under a framed photo of their honeymoon, was a thin folder marked with my husband's name. My chest tightened as I opened it. Inside was a document, a will. His signature at the bottom, but the handwriting above it wasn't his. It looked forced, shaky, unnatural. I knew his hand better than anyone. He had written me hundreds of notes in our lifetime. Small reminders, love letters, even grocery lists. This wasn't him. My throat closed. I flipped through the pages. The terms were different, completely different. Everything, every property, every savings account. Now under Amir's sole control, managed by his spouse, Nadia. My name wasn't mentioned once. Not even as a caretaker. I stared at it until my vision blurred. And that's when I realized this was why she had that deposit box. This was why she laughed when I fell. She wasn't mocking my pain. She was celebrating a victory. But what kind of person rewrites a dead man's will? What kind of woman worms her way into a family just to erase its matriarch? I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My body shook as I folded the papers back, my tears dripping onto the ink. I locked the study door behind me and went to bed pretending to sleep. But my mind kept replaying her words from weeks ago. Guess old age finally caught up with you. Now I understood what she meant. The next morning, I confronted her. My voice trembled, but my eyes didn't. "Where did you get my husband's documents, Nadia?" I asked. She looked up from her phone, her face a mask of innocence. "I don't know what you mean, Mama." I slammed the folder on the table. This is not his handwriting. What are you doing with it?" She didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. Instead, she smiled, a calm, practiced smile, and said softly, "You're too old to understand what your husband really wanted." Those words hit me harder than any slap. Too old? Too blind? Too naive? Maybe she was right. I had been all of those things. But not anymore. That night, I walked through the house like a stranger wandering through the ruins of her own life. Every object, every framed photo looked like a lie. I replayed everything in my mind. The way Amir started keeping secrets, the mysterious bank visits, the staged fall. Yes, staged. Because I remembered the rug. I remembered how that day, the rug had been perfectly aligned in the morning, but shifted slightly when I brought the tea tray out. And the water spill? She'd been the one washing the floor just before I entered. It all connected. I sat on my bed shaking, realizing how deeply I'd been manipulated under my own roof. I wanted to run to Amir, to show him the will, to make him see the truth. But a small voice inside me whispered, "What if he already knows?" That thought made me nauseous. Still, I needed proof. I couldn't just accuse them. I had to be sure. So I took the will and hid it inside my drawer, wrapped carefully in one of my husband's old scarves. For the first time in months, I slept with the door locked. The next morning, I woke up early, determined to take the document to a lawyer. I even ironed my clothes. Something about looking proper made me feel stronger. But when I opened the drawer, my heart stopped. The scarf was there, but the will was gone. Completely gone. I tore the drawer apart, searched under the bed, behind the dresser. Nothing. The proof I'd risked everything for had vanished. I felt dizzy, betrayed by the walls themselves. I ran into the hallway, shouting for Amir. He came out half asleep, confused, asking what had happened. I told him, "Someone's been in my room. My husband's will, it's missing." He rubbed his face, sighed, and said softly, "Mom, please, stop digging." For a moment I couldn't even breathe. That one sentence told me everything. He knew. My son, my own flesh and blood, was part of it. And as he turned his back and walked away, something inside me finally broke. I realized then, this wasn't just about inheritance or property. It was about control, about erasing me completely from the story I helped build. But they underestimated one thing. I may be old, but I'm not done, and I swore to myself that day I would find out what's inside that deposit box, even if it destroys everything I have left. Because sometimes, the truth doesn't just set you free. It burns down every lie along the way. And when the ashes settle, only one person is left standing. But before I could take the will to a lawyer, before I could even think of revenge, it disappeared from my drawer. Just like that. "You've stayed silent too long," my lawyer told me, his eyes heavy with pity, but his words sharp as truth. That night, I realized silence wasn't dignity anymore. It was surrender. For months, I had watched my home, my peace, my son slip away piece by piece. But the moment Amir told me to stop digging, something in me hardened. If my family wanted a war, then I would give them one. Only this time, I would fight it on my terms, quietly, intelligently, and with evidence no one could twist. I called an old friend, a man who had once helped my husband settle property disputes years ago. When I told him everything, he didn't interrupt. He just listened. The kind of listening that comes from knowing injustice too well. When I finished, he said gently, "You need proof. Solid proof. Because people believe papers and recordings, not tears." Those words became my armor. Over the next few weeks, I gathered everything. The housemaid, who had been around long before Nadia came, admitted something chilling, that she had seen Nadia with my husband's old files before he died. She also confessed she'd been told to keep quiet about some paperwork changes. I recorded her statement, my heart pounding with both fear and validation. Then came the bank visits. My lawyer managed to get confirmation that the safe deposit box existed, under Nadia's name, but containing documents linked to my husband. That was enough for a legal inquiry, he said. But I didn't want to go public yet. I wanted her to hear it first, from me. I wanted her calm face to finally break. And most of all, I wanted Amir to hear everything she'd done in the home I built. So I did what mothers do best. I called for dinner. A simple message in the family group chat. "Let's all eat together tonight. It's been too long." No one suspected a thing. I cooked everything myself. His favorite biryani, her favorite dessert, even lit the old candles I hadn't used since my husband's last birthday. The table looked perfect, but inside, I was a storm waiting for the first clap of thunder. When they finally sat down, the air was too still. Amir smiled politely, asking how I'd been. Nadia pretended sweetness, complimenting the food she didn't even taste. I poured tea into their cups, steadying my shaking hands. And then before anyone could take the first sip, I said softly, "Don't worry. This cup isn't poisoned. But your lies might be." Amir froze, his spoon halfway to his mouth. Nadia's eyes flickered, just for a second, before she set her cup down. "What are you talking about, Mama?" she asked, her voice sweet, but her tone carried steel. I leaned back and looked straight at her. "I know everything. The forged will, the stolen pension, the deposit box, even the man you met outside the bank." Her lips parted slightly, but she didn't deny it. Amir looked from her to me, confused, frightened even. I continued, my voice trembling with anger. "I raised my son to be honest, to respect his father's memory. But you—" My hand shook as I pointed at her. "You've turned him into a stranger." There was a long silence. Then slowly she stood up. She smoothed her dress, looked me dead in the eyes, and said coldly, "You think you can win against me? Ask Amir who owns this house now." I looked at my son, my own son. His eyes fell to the floor, his mouth shut tight. That silence, it cut deeper than any insult. He didn't say a word. He didn't defend me. He didn't even look at me. I felt my knees weaken, but I forced myself to stay upright. I smiled bitterly and said, "So that's it. You've both chosen your side." She leaned closer and whispered, "You should have stayed quiet. Mama, you were safer that way." That night, after they went upstairs, I sat alone at the dining table staring at the empty plates. The food had gone cold, untouched. The candles had burned down to wax puddles. For the first time in my life, my house felt haunted, not by ghosts, but by the living. I called my lawyer and told him everything. He said he'd move forward with the documentation. "We can file before they do," he assured me. But I didn't know then that Nadia had already taken her next step. 2 mornings later, there was a knock on my door. It wasn't Amir. It wasn't the postman. It was 2 officers in uniform. One of them held a folder with my name printed neatly on the top. "Mrs. Farah," he said formally, "we have a notice for you." My throat dried as I opened it. A legal complaint, filed under my name, accusing me of elder abuse and financial manipulation. I almost laughed at the irony. Me, the woman who gave her son everything. The woman who lived off her husband's pension, accused of exploiting them. When Amir came home that evening, I showed him the notice, expecting at least confusion, shock, maybe. But all he did was sigh and say quietly, "Mom, please, just let it go. Nadia's only doing what's best for all of us." I stared at him, searching for a trace of the boy I once knew, the boy who used to hold my hand crossing the street, the boy who cried when his father died. But that boy was gone. What stood before me was a man who had traded his mother's love for comfort. That night I didn't sleep. I kept replaying the dinner in my head, the smirk, the silence, the moment she said, "Your lies might be." I realized it wasn't just my son she'd won. It was my home, my dignity, my voice. But even as the tears fell, I made myself a promise. She would not take my truth. The next week, the court summoned me. My name, my husband's name, printed on that letter like a curse. I arrived trembling, clutching my files, my recordings, the maid's statement. My lawyer stood beside me, reassuring, but I barely heard him. When the judge entered and called my name, I looked up, only to see Nadia sitting in the front row, smiling. It wasn't the smile of a victor. It was the smile of someone who believed she had already buried me. But what she didn't know was that I wasn't buried. I was still breathing, still fighting, and this time, I wouldn't just defend myself. I would expose every single thing she'd done, even if it destroyed us all. I swear on my husband's grave I never touched that money. Those were the first words I spoke in court. My voice trembled, but I refused to look away. Across the room, Nadia sat in her white shalwar kameez, hands folded like a saint, her face streaked with carefully placed tears. And beside her, my son, Amir. The same boy whose fever I once stayed up all night to break, now sitting on the opposite bench, avoiding my eyes. Have you ever felt your heart beating so hard that even your breath sounds guilty? That's how it felt when the judge called my name. The courtroom smelled of old wood and stale perfume, and every word echoed longer than it should have. When the prosecutor stood up, his words sliced through the silence. "Your Honor, this is a simple case of elder financial abuse. A mother, unable to accept her son's new life, tried to control his wealth, his marriage, his freedom." Nadia lowered her head, pretending to cry, and Amir instinctively reached to comfort her. That one gesture was enough to shatter me. My lawyer placed his hand on mine, whispering, "Stay calm, we'll get there." But how does a mother stay calm when her child's eyes refuse to meet hers? As I took the stand, my hands shook around the Quran. I swore to speak the truth, but the truth itself had become my prison. Every question felt like a dagger. Did you or did you not attempt to transfer property funds under your name? Did you threaten your daughter-in-law? I wanted to scream that it was my husband's house, my years of sacrifice, my blood in those walls. But the law doesn't care about motherhood. It only listens to evidence. And Nadia, she knew that. When it was her turn, she played her part like she'd been rehearsing for years. Her voice cracked at the perfect moments. Her tears fell exactly when the judge glanced her way. "She always looked at me like I was never good enough," she sobbed. I tried to care for her, but she called me a thief, a snake, even accused me of poisoning her tea. The courtroom gasped. I felt every eye turn toward me like I was a monster. My lawyer tried to object, but Nadia's performance had already sunk its claws into everyone's sympathy. Then came the worst moment of all, Amir's testimony. He stood, straightened his collar, and said in that steady, distant voice I no longer recognized, "My mother has been under a lot of stress since my father's passing. Sometimes she forgets things. Maybe she didn't realize what she was doing." The judge nodded, taking notes, but those words pierced through me. Forgetful? Unstable? That's how he saw me now? The same son whose homework I did when he was sick, whose shoes I polished before every exam? But what happened next changed everything. When the prosecution rested, my lawyer stood up, his expression unreadable. He held a small flash drive between his fingers. "Your Honor," he said quietly, "with your permission, I'd like to present a recording." Nadia's lawyer immediately objected, too quickly. That reaction alone made the room buzz. The judge allowed it. My lawyer plugged the drive in, and within seconds Nadia's own voice filled the courtroom. "I only made that will because if she ever turns against us, we'll have insurance. Amir doesn't need to know." A heavy silence fell. You could hear the faint buzz of the ceiling fan, the scrape of a pen dropping. Nadia's eyes widened, and Amir turned slowly toward her, disbelief draining the color from his face. The judge replayed the line again. Each word hit like thunder. The mask she had worn for months, perfect wife, innocent victim, cracked in front of everyone. I didn't move. I couldn't. I just watched as the courtroom that had once judged me began to whisper against her. My lawyer leaned forward, voice firm now. "Would you care to explain this, Mrs. Nadia?" Her voice faltered. That's not me. That's fake," she stammered. But the maid had already confirmed her voice in her signed statement. And then the walls began to crumble. The judge ordered the bank records, the property transfers, the signatures. Every piece of evidence came undone like a tightly wound thread snapping free. Her name appeared on secret withdrawals, fake documents, even on the lawyer's letterhead that forged my husband's signature. I saw Amir's shoulders slump. His hands began to tremble. He looked at me for the first time, not as an enemy, but as the mother he had betrayed. But it was too late. I had cried enough tears to fill a river. I had begged, prayed, even doubted my own sanity. There was nothing left inside me now but silence. When the judge finally spoke, his voice was calm but final. "This court finds Mrs. Nadia guilty of fraud and forgery. Further investigation will proceed under criminal charges." Gasps echoed again, but I heard nothing. My body felt weightless, like I was floating outside of myself, watching from above. Justice had come, not like a roaring fire, but like a cold wind that numbs everything it touches. Nadia collapsed into her seat, sobbing. But I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel revenge. I only felt empty. My eyes searched for Amir, hoping for some sign, a glance, a word, a whisper of apology. Instead, he stood. He looked at me with a face full of regret, then turned and walked toward the door. No words, no goodbye. Just the sound of his footsteps fading into the echoing hall. And in that silence, as the court officers cleared the room, I finally realized I was free. Free from the lies, from the manipulation, from the shadow she had cast over my home. But freedom came with a price I never imagined paying. Because when the truth finally set me free, my son was already walking away. The first morning after the trial, I woke up to silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that presses on your chest, heavy and hollow. The house that once echoed with laughter and arguments now felt like a museum of ghosts. Nadia's perfume still lingered in the hallway, and Amir's slippers sat neatly by the door, untouched. I tried to make breakfast the way I used to, but even the kettle's whistle felt like it was mocking me. Justice had been served, they said. Justice. But tell me, what kind of justice leaves a mother with an empty table and a son who won't call? Days turned into weeks. The court case made headlines for a while. People whispered my name like it was a tragic story from a film. The mother whose son testified against her. They didn't see the nights I spent staring at the front gate, hoping he'd walk in. They didn't hear the creak of the stairs when I'd wake up from dreams where my husband was still alive, reminding me to stay strong. Sometimes I'd stand in front of the mirror, trying to recognize the woman who had survived all that. But all I saw was someone learning to breathe again. But I knew one thing: I couldn't keep drowning in memories. One morning, I walked out of that house with nothing but a bag of clothes and a decision. I went to the local women's shelter, a place I had once donated to but never truly understood. I told them I wanted to help. The first woman I met had eyes full of fear. Her husband had taken everything: money, dignity, even her children. When she spoke, her voice shook, and suddenly I saw myself in her. The betrayal, the exhaustion, the quiet rage. Helping her stitch her clothes and fill out legal forms gave me something my own home never could anymore: a reason to keep moving forward. As the months passed, the ache began to soften. I found peace in small things: the laughter of women rebuilding their lives, the scent of freshly baked bread in the shelter kitchen, the feel of morning sunlight through the windows. For the first time in years, I wasn't fighting anyone. Not Nadia, not Amir, not even myself. I learned something profound there. Forgiveness isn't about letting others go. It's about setting yourself free from their shadow. But just when I thought my story had reached its quiet ending, life tested me one more time. It was a cold afternoon in December when I heard a knock at the door. I thought it was another volunteer, but when I opened it, my breath caught. It was Amir. He looked older, thinner, his eyes red as if sleep had been a stranger for months. For a second, neither of us spoke. The years of love, betrayal, and silence hung between us like a curtain of glass. Then softly he said, "Mom, can I come in?" I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to slam the door, to remind him of every wound his silence had caused. But another part, the mother in me, just nodded. He stepped inside, his footsteps hesitant, like he was walking on memories instead of tiles. In his hand he held an envelope. I noticed the trembling of his fingers as he handed it to me. I found this while going through Dad's papers," he said. "I never read it before." "I thought you should." The handwriting stopped my breath. My husband's steady script, the same one that had signed birthday cards, love notes, even our first house papers. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside, his words were simple but powerful. If love turns into greed, protect the truth, even if it breaks the family. I looked up at Amir, and he was crying now, openly, uncontrollably. "I didn't know, Mom," he whispered. "I thought I was doing the right thing. She told me you hated her, that you wanted to take everything away from us. I believed her." Hearing him say that didn't undo the pain, but it did something else. It opened the wound just enough for healing to begin. I placed my hand over his. "You were blinded by love," I said quietly. "So was I. Your father warned us about this. He knew love without truth becomes poison." He nodded, tears running freely down his face. For a long time we sat there in silence. No apologies could fix what had been lost. But in that quiet moment, something deeper took its place. understanding. Later that night, after he left, I sat alone with my husband's letter one more time. I read it again and again until the ink blurred through my tears. He had known me better than anyone. He had known this house, this family would be tested, and he had trusted me to protect the truth, even if it cost me everything. For the first time in months, I didn't feel broken. I didn't feel like a victim or even a survivor. I felt free, not because justice had been done in court, but because I had finally let go of the weight that had chained me to the past. Sometimes late at night, I still think about Nadia, where she might be, what she might tell herself to sleep at night. But I don't hate her anymore. Hate only keeps the wounds open. I've learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering without letting it destroy you. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you loved, tell me. Would you forgive them, or would you close the door forever? Because I once thought forgiveness was weakness. Now I know it's the purest kind of strength. And as I folded my husband's letter and placed it back in its envelope, I whispered a quiet prayer. Not for revenge, not even for reconciliation, but for peace. For my son, for the woman I used to be, for the home that had burned but somehow taught me to rise from the ashes. The night outside was silent again. But this time it wasn't the silence of loss. It was the silence of peace, the kind that follows storms. And that's when I learned the truth. Freedom is the greatest inheritance.